One thing I was thinking about recently is how much harder videography is than photography. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love taking photos and I wouldn't say anything against photographers. It's a very difficult thing to do. However, here are my 10 reasons why being a videographer is harder than being a photographer. But before I get to my actual list, I'd like to compare it to another analogy I've heard. You may be familiar with the analogy of playing a guitar versus playing a piano. Some people say that learning to play guitar at first is really easy, while learning to play piano at first is very difficult. However, over time, if you stick with one long enough, it's much easier to master the piano, even though it was very hard at first, while the guitar, being easy at first, is much more difficult to master and become a true expert. And I think the same is true with video and photography. Video is really easy to pick up and start going, while photography can be really challenging up front. You're dealing with strobes and shutter speeds and all these different things that you're not quite sure what they are at first. However, the more time that you invest into each of these areas, the sooner you'll see that doing video and doing it right and doing it well is much more difficult than being a really, really good photographer. So here's why. The first and most obvious reason is that photography, you're dealing with one frame, while video, you're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of frames, depending on the scene. So while you might be challenged with getting a particular photo, getting that same shot in video takes a lot longer and it's a lot more to go through in post-production. Not to mention, if you want to get a second take with a photo, you just take another shot. With video, you have to wait the entire length of the clip that you're trying to record to get that second take. So if you're trying to get a 5-minute thing, you've got to do an additional 5 minutes of shooting just to get that one clip. Number 2, with photography, it's a lot easier to get powerful lights. With video, because the lights have to be continuous, they have to be a lot bigger. Oftentimes they're a lot heavier and they run a lot hotter. Photography is easy. You get a couple strobes, you can pack a lot of punch into a small condensed short burst because that's all you need is that one shot. For video, that light has to last 24 frames at least, and to match the power of strobes and speed lights, you're talking about some seriously powerful lights. With a decent strobe, photographers can overcome the power of the sun, but it takes a lot of power in a video light for videographers to do the same thing. Number 3. With video, you're a lot more likely to need audio. Photography, there's essentially no audio ever, so you don't have to worry about air conditioning noise, room tone, the construction that's going on next door. All of that doesn't really matter because you're not capturing the sound. With video, more than likely you are capturing audio of some kind, and it has to be good. So you have to turn off that AC, you've got to find a place that's quiet, and you've got to set up a whole other kit just to capture audio. Number 4. Photographers have it easy. Photoshop is wonderful and works some serious magic, but you don't have the same luxuries if you're doing video. Now, there are some advanced techniques that you can get into in After Effects and high-end productions using Nuke, but for the most part, what you shoot with video is kind of what you get. You can't do the same kind of manipulations that you can with Photoshop, and certainly not as easy as you can with Photoshop. So if you're a photographer and you make a mistake or something got in the frame or you want to change something, it's not that big of a deal. For video, it's a huge undertaking and oftentimes can cost twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times what the actual production costs just to fix that issue. Number 5. We already talked about photographers having less files to deal with in terms of actual frames. And because there are less frames to deal with, those frames can be packed with as much information and quality as possible, hence why we have raw files. Video doesn't always get that same luxury. There is raw video, but it takes up a lot of space, and even then you're still not talking about the same resolutions that you're talking about with photos. All that means is that you have a lot less to work with in post-production. So if you want to tweak your highlights or change your color or crop into a shot, it's a lot easier to do that with a big high-res raw photo than it is to do with a video file that, even if it's 4K, it still might not be raw and it's not going to be as flexible as photos. Number 6. This might be fairly subjective, but it seems to me that photographers are held in higher esteem by average people. Now, that's not to say that people aren't excited about filmmaking, stuff in Hollywood and big productions. But if you're talking about just an independent shooter, someone who does photos compared to someone who does video, most average people can resonate with someone who calls himself a photographer. While if you walk down the street and tell someone that you shoot videos for a living, you might get an awkward smile and a sideways stare. And this can translate to financial benefits as well. When you look at what people are willing to pay wedding photographers compared to wedding videographers, there's a big gap there. Now, obviously, there's always exceptions, and there's really well-paid wedding videographers. However, for the most part, most people during a wedding put the emphasis on photos rather than the video, and the video guys kind of get the shaft. Number 7. If you're a photographer, you're probably shooting autofocus. And while there are some photographers who do manual focus, it is pretty rare. Most people know the benefit of having autofocus and the speed and the flexibility it gives you when you're taking photos. That's not so much the case with video. Autofocus systems for video are either insanely expensive or not very reliable. So for the time being, if you're shooting video, you're likely stuck with manual focus, which can be much more difficult than photography, especially if you're shooting at those faster apertures to get that nice shallow depth of field and the blurred backgrounds. Number 8. If you're a photographer, you can move your shutter speed around all day. It doesn't really matter. You can slow it down to get some cool motion blur, or you can speed it way up to freeze the action. With video, you're pretty much locked to a specific shutter speed depending on your frame rate, and you can't really vary too far from that either direction. So while a photographer might use shutter speed to affect and determine the exposure of an image, video people don't have that same luxury. They're pretty much locked, and thus they have to resort to things like ND filters if the scene's too bright. Number 9. If you look at the typical video setup, it's likely going to be larger, heavier, and less portable than what a photographer has to deal with. And that's because video cameras need more room to breathe, and they need batteries that are going to offer a little bit more juice to keep their cameras running all day. If you're a photographer, you can easily hop on an airplane with pretty much everything you need in a backpack. If you're shooting video, you're likely checking a few bags. And number 10. Photography is essentially the slowest motion you can capture. It's one frame of one instant in time. Video, on the other hand, there's always movement. There's always something happening. And you really have to keep that in mind to create interesting shots. A photographer gets to worry about composition, lighting, color, all that stuff. But video people have to keep all that in mind, as well as the sense of movement and how the camera's moving and how things are moving in the frame. That's a lot more to keep in mind, especially when you're trying to handle all the basic stuff anyway. So that's my list of the 10 reasons why videography is harder than photography. Let me know if I missed anything, and let me know if you disagree. I know there's a lot of photographers out there who'd say taking photos is a lot harder than shooting video. So let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts.